A voice explains that the accident happened while they were on their way to pick up their daughter from kindergarten. People comment that it's a tragedy since the 5-year-old girl suddenly became an orphan. A worried relative asks if Little will be all alone from now on. The tense question of who will adopt the child lingers in the air. The family members argue, each giving an excuse for not being able to take her in. Suddenly stands up, declaring that sending the child to an orphanage would look terrible, so she will adopt her. Another woman questions her decision, reminding her that she just started working, but the young woman replies that she's already made up her mind. With a look of pure determination, she says she'll raise her sister's daughter. A young man then turns to the little girl and asks if she wants to live with her aunt. Explains with a gentle smile that she feels very lonely living by herself, and the girl asks if her aunt is also alone. Little answers with a radiant smile that yes, she wants to. Years later, the girl yells from outside the house, asking why her mother didn't wake her up. Now 34 replies that she tried to wake her and urges her to eat breakfast before arrives. Says he doesn't need to pick her up every day since they part ways at the station anyway. With a teasing smile, her mother says she's being shy again. The girl, now a 15-year-old student, insists that is just her childhood friend and tutor. Reacts with an excited, making ask why she's acting so cute. Her mother thinks the girl just doesn't want to be honest and that nothing happens without a hidden reason. The 20-year-old neighbor arrives with a bright smile and greets Son good morning. She welcomes him at the door, explaining that is still eating, while thinking that he wouldn't come to pick her up every day without a reason. Awkwardly suggests that maybe it's time for her to stop calling him, since he's 20 now and not a kid anymore. Laughs, patting his head as she comments on how much he's grown, but the young man asks her to stop. With a smile, she says that changing how she calls him is hard and jokingly suggests he should call her mama, since she thinks of him like a son. The young man looks at her seriously and says he's not her son. Arrives, ready to leave, apologizing for the delay and interrupting the moment. As the two head out, waves goodbye and reminds them of the promise they made for the evening. The door closes and she remains alone in the hallway, telling herself that everything is fine. A thought crosses her mind about how quiet the house becomes when she's alone. She then keeps herself busy with household chores, cleaning the floor and doing the laundry. While hanging a nameplate with his name, looks out the window and watches the two young people together outside. She reflects that if ever gets married and leaves home one day, she'll end up living alone. Remembers that on that day when she first saw completely by herself, she didn't want the little girl to feel lonely. A flashback shows her reaching out her hand to Little, determined not to let her be left helpless. Back in the present, a voice on her computer ends the day's online meeting, thanking everyone for their good work. Still on the phone, she hears her boss praising her performance in the meeting, to which she modestly replies that it's an exaggeration. The CEO laughs and explains that it's because of all the accomplishments has achieved over the past 10 years. Surprised by how much time has passed, agrees that indeed a lot has happened. Her boss continues, recalling the shock everyone felt when her new recruit suddenly announced she had become a mother, making apologize emotionally. Bowing in a gesture of gratitude, she expresses how thankful she is for all the support she received back then. Fondly recalls all the times Son helped her, allowing her to work from home or take paid leave to care for. Her boss tells her to relax, saying that creating a good work environment for her employees is also part of her job. Explains that, as a woman, she wanted to support for voluntarily adopting her niece, and then she asks how things are going. She catches completely off guard by saying that it's about time she found a man. Thinks annoyed that she doesn't want to hear that from a woman who's already been divorced 3 times, while her boss insists that love is a wonderful thing and would make her feel more fulfilled. His mother replies that she also wants to experience love, but it's still not the right time, at least not until graduates. But the CEO reminds her that by then, she'll already be around 40. Then asks if now isn't the perfect moment to think about her own happiness. Sitting at her desk, reflects on the question, wondering what her own happiness really means. She decides that she can't get married because she doesn't want to feel uncomfortable about bringing a stranger into their family, since the girl isn't her biological daughter. She reaffirms to herself that the most important thing in her life right now is, as the house celebrates a belated happy birthday for. During the celebration, thanks them for the preparations and scolds him for mistaking the non-alcoholic drink for champagne, reminding him that he's still underage. Says the dinner isn't anything special, but reassures her, saying his family just went out to a restaurant. With a sincere smile, he admits that he actually prefers the food San made. Beaming, she thinks about how is such a good and honest boy, while he compliments how delicious the meal is. Then reflects that it would truly be wonderful if a boy like him becames. She lets her imagination run wild, picturing the two of them getting married and concluding that it would be the best possible outcome. His mother mentally lists qualities: a kind and serious personality, handsome, tall, and with a promising future at a top university. Then she realizes that if married their neighbor, she would live just a minute away. Mining would never have to be alone. With a sparkle in her eyes, decides he's the perfect husband for her daughter. Watching their interaction, she happily notices that they seem to like each other, while asks why he's still there and the boy teases her. Her mother steps in with a smile, explaining that she was the one who invited him, since without has trouble understanding her lessons. Offers orange juice or to the young pair, but questions the drink her mother is serving herself. The boy asks if she's sure about opening a wine that looks expensive, but the hostess assures him it's fine, it was a gift. Praises the fruity, delicious flavor of the wine and asks for a sip, but her mother scolds her, reminding her that she's still a high school student. As the two struggle over the glass, explains that at her job, scenes of minors drinking are not allowed, not even as a joke. The girl complains that it's unfair, and her mother tells her to let go of the glass, but the tug-of-war causes the wine to spill. Both stare in shock as the wine splashes all over the back of shirt. Apologizes for what happened, but the boy, smiling awkwardly, tells her not to worry about it. She then offers him the chance to take a shower and hands him a change of clothes she had kept from the time he used to help study. With a teasing look, suggests that, as an apology for spilling the wine, she could wash his back if they took a bath together. She reminds him that there's no need to be shy, since they used to bathe together a long time ago, but the embarrassed young man quickly replies that that was 10 years ago. Tells him to soak the stained shirt and agrees with a smile. Completely caught off guard, she stares at him wide-eyed and stammers an okay. The bathroom door closes with a thud, leaving her alone and dazed in the hallway. Sliding down to the floor, she wonders in embarrassment why she's blushing, thinking it's ridiculous. Her face still warm, tells herself it's just a boy's torso, and questions whether she's acting like a teenager. She reflects that who's already old enough to drink now has the slim, toned body of a young man. Meanwhile, yawns while playing cards, commenting that maybe she's getting drunk just from the smell of the wine. The girl announces she's sleepy and will brush her teeth and go to bed, wobbling a bit as she stands from the table. Realizing how late it's gotten, asks if he shouldn't be heading home soon. The young man replies that he doesn't have a curfew and lives next door, so she cheerfully suggests that he keep her company for a little while longer. Boasts with a grin that he can handle his alcohol well, but quickly realizes what he just said and covers his mouth. Teases him, asking if he used to drink before turning 20 and saying that he shouldn't be doing that. With a gentle smile, she decides to pretend she didn't hear what he just admitted. She reflects, finding it a bit unbelievable that is now old enough to drink with her. She laments that as she gets older, time seems to pass faster and she's becoming a spinster. Reassures her, saying she's not a spinster, but replies that he doesn't need to flatter her. Slapping his hands on the table, he insists passionately that it's not a compliment. The young man then declares that San is beautiful, kind, and has a genuine mature charm. Blushing deeply, he turns his gaze away, unable to finish the sentence. Thanks him with a warm smile, saying that he's the only one who would ever say something like that to her. Dropping the previous subject, leans in and asks with a smile if has a girlfriend. Completely embarrassed, the young man stammers that he's never had a single girlfriend, which shocks her. She expresses her surprise, saying she thought he must be super popular, while the boy pleads with her not to look so astonished. Then remembers that he did receive a few confessions back when he was in the swimming club, making exclaim that she knew he was popular. He takes a sip and explains that he didn't go out with any of them, because they just weren't what he was looking for. With a bright smile, asks if there's someone he likes, causing him to spit out his drink in surprise. His reaction excites her, as she realizes he must have a crush, something she considers perfectly natural for a healthy young man. Whispering in his ear, she asks if he's been in love with that person for a long time. Then a thought suddenly hits her. She concludes that must be in love with her daughter and imagines a happy future for them together. Blushing and covering his mouth, the young man confesses that he's liked this person for so long that he can't even imagine dating anyone else. Listens, her face flushed, as expresses his fear of ruining their current relationship and his concern about their age difference. With their hearts racing, both sit at the table, deeply embarrassed, while she thinks to herself that this must be pure love. She reflects on the 5-year age gap, which seemed significant back when they were still students. Slamming her hand on the table, she passionately encourages him, saying not to worry because age doesn't matter in love and that he needs to confess his feelings. Insists that he believe in himself and be brave, warning him that if he hesitates too long, someone else might win her heart. Overcome with emotion, the young man stands up, his face burning, and declares that he has always loved her. Continues his heartfelt confession, saying that for 10 years he has loved only her and no one else. Completely shocked and dizzy, can barely process what's happening. The stunning realization hits her like a wave. He was talking about her, not her daughter. Jolts awake from the dream, shouting his name and hastily promising to prepare breakfast. Apologizes profusely, but says there's no need, explaining that she already had cereal and will buy something for lunch. The girl then asks if her mother was drinking with until late last night, which catches completely off guard. Trying to play it off, she laughs nervously and says she was drunk and doesn't remember much, though confession flashes vividly in her mind. Points out that her mother's face is completely red and asks what's wrong, but insists that she's perfectly fine. Suddenly appears at the door to pick up, and the shock makes scream internally. Completely flustered, she stammers a good morning in return, and the young man explains that he rang the doorbell. Then realizes what she's wearing, by how embarrassing her outfit is. Her daughter asks why she's so shaken, reminding her that has seen her in pajamas plenty of times before, leaving wondering what's wrong with her. Looking at the young man, she understands that she's acting this way because now she sees him as a man. Then turns to her daughter and asks her to go ahead first, and though a bit confused, agrees. Comments a bit awkwardly that it's unusual for San to sleep in so late. She agrees, admitting she had a bit of trouble falling asleep, and the young man confesses that he didn't sleep at all the previous night either. With a nervous smile, declares that she's going to pretend he didn't say anything yesterday. She tries to justify his behavior, saying he was drunk and in a strange mood, but the young man tries to interrupt her, saying that he understands. Smiling, she tells him she's already an auntie and not childish enough to take the words of a drunk person seriously. As turns to leave, she cheerfully suggests that they both just forget what happened the day before. He suddenly grabs her arm, calling her name, while she insists he should forget it. The young man asks why she's saying those things, admitting that even though he was drunk, his feelings were real. With a serious, heartfelt gaze, he reaffirms that he's truly liked her for a long time. Looks at him, moved, as confesses that he's thought about giving up countless times, imagining she only saw him as some kid who was taking advantage of her kindness. Even so, declares that he likes San and that he truly wants to go out with her. With a gentle smile, he says she doesn't need to give him an answer right away, then turns and walks out the door. She drops to her knees for a moment, completely frozen before slowly standing up. With her hands over her mouth and her face blushing, softly whispers his name, realizing that was serious. Elsewhere, a close friend of reacts with excitement, unable to believe that he actually confessed. She finds the situation hilarious, but the young man, looking exhausted, asks what's so funny. His friend remarks that she thought it was strange when he fell asleep during class, and admits it was because he couldn't sleep the night before. Sighs, saying he must have really liked her, and the young man asks if she didn't believe him. She teases that wanting to be with someone else's hot mom sounds like a childish fantasy, but he actually held onto those feelings for 10 years. Playfully, his friend asks if the story was that he fell in love after seeing her naked in the bath, but scolds her for making him sound like a pervert. His friend congratulates him for finally confessing, but he yells in frustration for her to stop, insisting that he's not a dog. Wonders gloomily if his confession was nothing more than a nuisance to her. Remarks that while it's wonderful when a confession goes well, it's also like throwing a one-sided emotional bomb into a relationship. The young man realizes with regret that he and San might never be able to go back to the way things were before. He admits that he was already at his limit, trying to keep that one-sided love alive. The frustration of not being seen as a man, but as a child, by the woman he loved was wearing him down. That night when he arrives home, calls out to her mother and asks what's for dinner. The girl is shocked when she walks into the living room and finds the place completely messy, with her mother collapsed on the floor. Wakes up a bit disoriented and calls out's name when she sees her. Realizing the time on her phone, panics at how late it's gotten, while her worried daughter suggests they go out to eat instead. Points out that her mother has been acting strange since the morning, but insists she's fine and says she'll clean up the mess quickly. The girl stares at her and directly asks if something happened with, making lose her balance. His mother tries to brush it off, saying that's a weird thing to ask, but the girl insists that the two of them were acting strangely that morning. Then bluntly asks if confessed to her, causing to trip and fall in shock. Holding her aching head, the woman sits on the floor, groaning about the accident. Her daughter calmly concludes that, judging by her reaction, he really did confess, despite desperate denial. With a bandage on her forehead, the mother tries to get to listen to her, but the girl already seems to have figured everything out. Stunned, asks if her daughter knew that was in love with her, and casually replies that she did. The young girl then questions how anyone could not have noticed, leaving her mother completely speechless. Sitting on the couch, sighs, saying she doesn't know whether to call dense or just slow, while the woman struggles to process the revelation. Blushing, insists there was no way she could have known, since, too, she's just the neighbor auntie with a 10-year age gap. Remarks that to her, her mother really is an aunt, which leaves slightly embarrassed. The girl then looks at her with a smile and asks if age difference really matters in love, saying that doesn't see it that way. A flashback plays in Sm's mind. She remembers telling herself that age doesn't matter when there's love. Still in disbelief, she admits she honestly thought the person he liked was. Her daughter, however, interrupts and says that was just her own misunderstanding. Argues that he comes to pick up every day, but the girl counters that it's because he wants to see her mother's face. Mentions how dedicated he is in helping study, and the girl reminds her that it's only because she asked him to. Then reveals that when got sick, took care of her day and night to lighten her mother's burden, exclaiming that it was obviously because of her. Completely shocked by these revelations, struggles to process what it all means. Panics, asking if really likes her, while confirms with a smile that he's totally in love with her. Fanning herself casually, the girl asks what her mother plans to do about it. Presses her directly, asking whether she's going to date or not, leaving stammering that everything is just too sudden. The young girl places a heart-shaped cushion beside her, assuring her mother that she doesn't need to worry about her. She continues, explaining that she's already 15 and wouldn't stand in the way of her mother's marriage. Stretching, adds that she'd actually be happy if they got married. It would be amazing to have a young dad, which completely stuns. Utterly flustered, mother scolds her, saying she shouldn't tease adults like that. The girl then takes on a serious tone, confessing that she feels a bit guilty because sacrificed her 20s for a little girl she barely knew. Tries to stop her by shouting her name, but continues, saying that because of her, her mother's life was affected. Holding her mother's hand, the young girl stops her from continuing that line of thought, telling her she doesn't see herself as a girl barely knew. Collapses onto, shouting tearfully that it's the other way around, that her daughter has no idea how much she's given her. Complains that her mother's being too clingy and pushes her away, while eyes brimming with tears, begins to recall the day her daughter first called her mom. The girl groans that she's tired of hearing that story, reminding her mother that she tells it every time she drinks and ends up crying. Listens quietly as acknowledges that she had to hold herself back for her sake, but still considers her real mother. With a warm smile, the young girl says she knows, has always wanted her happiness, but that she also wants her mom to be happy too. Then pops a lollipop into her mother's mouth, advising her to think a little more about her own life. She cheerfully announces that she's going to get changed so they can go out to eat since she's starving. Left alone in the hallway, sighs softly, whispering his name while holding the lollipop visibly moved. As her daughter suggests an Italian restaurant near the station, reflects on how much has grown. Later, while soaking in the bath, she relaxes and thinks back on the day's events, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. The memory of his words that she didn't need to give him an immediate answer comes back to her. In the shower, realizes she can't just avoid him after what happened. Her thoughts are suddenly interrupted by the sound of the doorbell and announces his arrival from outside. Panic hits her as she wonders if it's already time for class, thinking he's come earlier than usual. Wrapped only in a towel, she panics because she can't possibly open the door like that, yet she hears him calling out for her. Remembering how she had shown up in just a towel in front of him several times before, she decides it would be weird to act differently now. Smiling, invites him in, leaving completely stunned and speechless. Covering his face, the young man asks in exasperation why she's dressed like that. Utterly embarrassed, she tries to explain, saying she was just cleaning the storage room and got really sweaty. Scolds her, saying she should have gotten dressed first and warning that if it had been a stranger at the door, she could have been attacked. Laughs, telling him not to be silly, no one would be interested in an older woman like her, but insists that's not true. Blushing, he says that San is beautiful and full of charm, and that there's at least one guy right there who's pretty excited. Completely flustered, she stammers, asking what he's saying, and the young man explains that the woman he likes is standing half-naked right in front of him. Gasps, realizing she only answered the door like that because she knew it was. She frantically begs him not to misunderstand, assuring him she wasn't trying to seduce him or anything like that. Peeks through the doorway with a mischievous grin, commenting that it looks like the two of them are having fun. The girl steps in and teases them, saying they're moving fast and that her mom's being quite bold. Smiling, she says she'll be in her room and that they can take all the time they need before the tutoring session. As she climbs the stairs, jokes that they can even cancel the lesson if they want, making her mother yell that nothing was happening. After the girl leaves, turns to, a bit hesitant, and asks if she happened to tell about him. Admits that she didn't tell him, but it seems new from the very beginning. Agrees that it was pretty obvious, leaving her stunned as she realizes just how dense she's been. He then says that even though it's a bit early, he'll head to his room. Before he can go upstairs, stops him, saying she wants to talk with him first. Surprised, the young man asks if she plans to have that conversation dressed like that, and quickly replies that of course she's going to change. Moments later, a tense silence fills the house as she gets ready. In the kitchen, prepares tea for the two of them, while the young man waits in the dining room. Her hands tremble with nervousness as she picks up the teacup. Finally, she suggests that, to begin with, they should try to organize their thoughts. Blushing deeply, she gathers her courage and asks if really likes her. Caught off guard by the direct question, blushes and confirms that yes, he likes her. Softly whispers his name, watching as he shyly covers his mouth. She realizes that, despite knowing him for so many years, she's never noticed that little gesture before. The woman then asks, just to be sure, what kind of relationship he wants to have with her exactly. With a serious expression, declares that he wants a genuine relationship and that eventually he'd like to marry her. Completely stunned by his words, stammers the word marriage in disbelief. She tries to argue that he's misunderstood, reminding him that he's still in college and financially dependent on his parents, but the young man simply smiles and agrees with what she's saying. His mother continues, pointing out that there's more than a 10-year age difference between them, and that is also part of the equation. He looks her in the eyes and calmly states that of course he knows she's a single mother. With a determination that leaves her speechless, reveals that his plans for the future include working alongside San to raise as his own daughter. Explains that he had planned to get a full-time job before confessing, making realize in shock that he's been thinking about their future for a long time. After a brief moment of reflection, she asks him directly when he started liking her. The young man casually replies that it was about 10 years ago, leaving her completely speechless. Calculates that 10 years ago was when they first met, and that he would have only been 10 years old, something he calmly confirms is correct. Confesses that it was practically love at first sight, and that he's found her incredibly beautiful ever since the first time he saw her. As she's overwhelmed by how embarrassingly sweet his confession sounds, he adds with a smile that there was no turning back after the time they took that bath together. The mention of a bath leaves in complete shock. She suddenly remembers that they did take a bath together once and hurriedly asks him to wait a second. The woman nervously asks if he's seen her that way ever since then, which catches him off guard. The young man mumbles an evasive response while she insists he must be joking, because back then she was just. The memory of that bath, when she was completely unguarded and exposed with him, suddenly floods mind. Bursting into tears, she cries out that it's awful, leaving shocked and confused. He defends himself, insisting that it's not his fault since she was the one who entered the bath after him. With her face buried in her hands, explains through sobs that she did that because she thought was just a child. Panicking, she describes in detail how he didn't even have body hair yet, saying he looked like a budding flower, and begs him never to remember that. As bangs her head on the table, wailing that she's the one who should be ashamed, the young man thinks to himself that in truth she was already an adult back then. With a bright, gentle smile, he tries to reassure her, saying that although he saw everything, it was only from the perspective of a 10-year-old boy, but that doesn't comfort her at all. After apologizing for losing control of her emotions, sighs deeply, acknowledging to herself that regardless of everything, she understands that feelings are genuine. Lowering her head, she quietly tells him that she can't go out with him. She explains that although his feelings make her very happy and she's truly grateful, she asks him please to understand her decision. Insists that by common sense, it's impossible for them to date. Surprised, asks what exactly she means by common sense. She tries to explain that common sense is just common sense, but he looks at her seriously and says he doesn't understand. Tells her that if she hated him or simply couldn't see a student as a romantic partner, that would be frustrating but understandable. The woman remains silent as he continues, saying that using common sense as an excuse isn't convincing at all. He reminds her that she's the one who once said that age doesn't matter when there's love, prompting her to snap back that people need to think realistically. He questions her further, pointing out that first it was common sense, and now it's realism. Argues that the issue isn't just about the two of them, it also involves her work, social decency, and most importantly, his parents. The mention of his parents leaves him speechless, and she continues, explaining that she owes them an enormous debt of gratitude. She recalls, moved, how they always helped her when she was struggling, since she had never raised a child before. Reminds him that he's the precious eldest son of the family. She goes on, saying that his parents would never be happy if he dated a lady with a child, and that she can't betray their kindness. Lowers his gaze and quietly admits that she might be right about that. With a resigned expression, says she wishes she could believe that marriage has nothing to do with parents, but that would be. The young man smiles and agrees, acknowledging that marriage isn't something that involves just the couple. With tears of relief in her eyes, feels grateful that understands her position. But then he calls her name and explains that because he knew she would worry about such things, he had already prepared for it. With a bright, confident smile, he reveals that he has already talked to his parents beforehand. Is left in absolute shock by the revelation, staring at him speechless as he smiles and tells her not to worry. A memory suddenly surfaces. She's back to the day she found Little standing in the rain, asking him what he was doing there. Little explains that his mother would be home late, but he accidentally left the house key inside. Worried he might catch a cold in the rain, invites him to stay at her place until his mother returns. The scene shifts to their neighboring houses under the heavy downpour. Smiling warmly, she tells him she'll heat up the bath and that he can take off his wet clothes, but the shy boy insists he's fine. Gently insists that he needs to warm up and starts helping him out of his soaked clothes, though he protests that he can do it himself. As she helps, she comments on how hard it is to take off clothes when they're wet, leaving the boy completely flustered. With a kind smile, notices that even his underwear is drenched and says she'll wash it, making the boy scream in embarrassment. In the shower, the boy sighs, wondering if Mama still sees him as a little kid from kindergarten. He looks at himself in the mirror, questioning if it's because he's still so skinny and weak. Suddenly, walks into the bathroom and cheerfully asks how the water temperature is, catching him completely off guard. Explains that she got a little wet in the rain and thought she'd warm up, leaving Young completely stunned as he asks why she's there. With a gentle smile, she asks if he'd like to take a bath with her. The boy stammers embarrassed, saying it's not that he doesn't want to, and she cheerfully replies that in that case it's fine. He tries to hurry out, saying he's already done, but stops him, asking him to wait. She playfully blows the foam off his face. Comments that she knows boys his age don't usually like taking baths, but points out that he's still covered in soap. With a bright smile, she invites him to sit down, saying she'll help wash him. While holding him in the bath, remarks how nice and warm it feels. She hugs him gently, saying how small, cute, and perfectly snug he feels in her arms. The boy admits sadly that he doesn't like being called cute because he's small and weak, and the kids at school tease him, saying he looks like a girl. Gently apologizes, admitting she didn't realize he felt that way. She reassures him with a warm smile, explaining that people grow at different paces and that boys usually develop a bit later. The woman tells him he doesn't need to worry because he'll grow quickly soon enough. The boy asks with a hint of hope if that's really true, and she enthusiastically replies, of course. Advises him to eat well and get plenty of exercise, suggesting sports like soccer or baseball, but he admits he's not very good at those. She pauses to think for a moment, then suggests he try swimming instead. The woman explains that swimmers are cool, smart, and end up with bodies shaped like a beautiful triangle, which leaves completely fascinated. She adds that she's also been thinking about enrolling in swimming lessons, making the boy decide eagerly that maybe he'll give it a try. Is delighted by the idea and suggests that maybe he and could go to the same place. As she happily rambles about other activities might enjoy, the boy quietly observes that Mama really does think a lot about. With a sincere smile, Little declares that he respects Mama. Surprised, she asks if he really respects her, and he nods, explaining that he watched her closely during the funeral. A flashback shows standing up and firmly declaring that she would take care of the child. The boy remembers that had been all alone back then, but Mama saved her. He tells her that he admired her, that she was different from all the other adults, and that to him she was like a hero. Listens silently as he continues, saying how amazing she was. She reflects on his words, thinking how wonderful it would be if she truly were a hero. He begins to say that this is why Mama is his, but she suddenly interrupts him, overcome with emotion. Out of nowhere, starts crying, covering her face with her hands and sinking into the water. The boy calls out to her, frightened and confused, not understanding what's happening. Drying her face, apologizes for scaring him and laughs softly, saying that this auntie is pretty pathetic. She then confesses the truth, admitting that a lot happened that day and that she failed at her job, leaving the boy surprised. With a sad smile, she says it would be nice if she were a cool hero who could do everything perfectly. She admits that even though she's doing her best with both and her work, she isn't handling either very well. Reveals that, for a brief moment that day, a dark thought crossed her mind. She confides in the boy that she honestly thought she might not be able to be a mother after all. Calling herself pathetic and embarrassing, she says she doesn't deserve to be smother. Determined, wipes away her tears and says she needs to pull herself together as an adult and as a mom because she still has to raise on her own. Grabs her hand tightly and shouts that she's not alone. Blushing, the boy declares that she has him by her side, that he's there for her, and that he'll protect her, no matter how hard or scary it might be. The boy hugs her tightly, begging her not to cry anymore. Laughs softly, feeling her energy return thanks to. He recalls how he used to see her as a saintly mother or a heroic figure, but eventually realized that she was just a fragile, lonely woman. It was at that moment that decided he wanted to become a man capable of protecting San. Back in the present, his friend teases him, saying she knew he fell in love with her naked body, and he snaps back irritably, asking if she even listened to what he just said. Outside his house, his mother greets. She casually mentions a meat sale at the market, and caught off guard, awkwardly responds with a polite hello. Thanks her for celebrating her son's birthday, making flustered. Trying to mask her discomfort, forces a smile as continues chatting warmly, asking about how he's doing at school. Then's tone shifts slightly. Nervously, she says that she'd actually like to talk about His mother asks, stunned, if he actually confessed to her. Flustered, asks how she knew, and the woman explains that her son had been acting strangely ever since the birthday party. Panicking, Smother hastily assures her that she turned him down, insisting that it's just common sense that the two of them shouldn't date. Smother pauses thoughtfully, saying it's already been 10 years since that day, leaving confused. She reminds her of the rainy day when forgot his house key and took care of him. The woman reveals that after that day, her son boldly declared that he would marry Mama when he grew up. Smother admits that she and her husband dismissed it as a childish fantasy at the time, but changed after that. He stopped being picky with his food and began putting effort into his studies and sports, even wanting to learn to swim despite struggling with it. She explains that, although she hoped he would eventually fall for someone his own age, for 10 years kept giving his all. With a gentle look, she tells that everything he did was to become a man worthy of her. Is moved as she processes the revelation that it was all because he loved her. Smother says that feelings are the most important thing, but adds that if she doesn't object. With a deep bow, asks her to please take good care of her son. Happily celebrates that his parents have approved, something that wouldn't normally happen for an older woman with a daughter. However, states firmly that she will not go out with, because there's no way she can do that. Her daughter retorts that arguments about love and marriage aren't very convincing coming from someone who's never been married. Irritated, insists that is just deluded by a childish first love fantasy. She says that dating a woman in her 30s would only lead him to despair, so it's better to hurt him as soon as possible. With a look of determination, decides she will show the sad reality of a woman like her. She then announces her grand plan to make him hate her, exclaiming that she will succeed. Decides she's going to show the harsh reality of dating a woman in her 30s to make him open his eyes. The young man walks into the room and calls out to her, saying that wanted something to drink. To his surprise, he finds downing a full glass of wine in one go. She lets out a satisfied sigh, thinking to herself that this is plan number one. With flushed cheeks and slightly dizzy, she leans toward him, declaring that a drunk 30-year-old woman is hard to handle. Holding the empty bottle, asks in concern if she's okay and whether she drank the whole thing by herself. With a sultry smile, confesses that she's been hiding it all this time, but the truth is she's actually a heavy drinker. Continuing her act, she claims that whenever work goes badly, she drinks until sunrise and that he'd have to carry her home. The young man looks at her skeptically, doubting she really drinks that much, but nervously insists that she does. He corrects her on the name of the popular highball and questions her odd choice of mixing tequila with lychee instead of lemon. Collapses onto the table, exhausted, insisting that she really does drink a lot. Questions her, reminding her that she didn't even drink until recently. He goes on, recalling how she once said she avoided alcohol so she could always drive in case her daughter got sick or hurt. The young man adds that she said that when his father offered her an alcoholic drink. Impressed, comments that she's surprised he remembers something like that, and he replies that of course he does. Explains with a bright smile that it's because he's been watching San all this time. As she stands up, the woman stumbles, dizzy, and he catches her, asking if she's okay. In one swift motion, he lifts her into his arms, leaving her completely stunned. Confused, tells him to wait a second. With a gentle look, explains that she seemed unsteady, so he got worried and will take her to her room. Blushing furiously, is left completely speechless. Embarrassed, she asks if she isn't too heavy, but he smiles and assures her that she's not heavy at all. As he carries her up the stairs, panics internally, finding it unbelievable that she's being carried like a princess at her age. The word failure echoes in her mind, marking the collapse of her first plan. Determined, decides to move on to plan number 2, declaring that a 30-year-old woman who spends money recklessly is hard to handle. She starts browsing luxury brand handbags online, thinking the plan will be even more effective if she's spending his hard-earned money. She imagines that if finds out she's a shallow, wasteful woman who only buys expensive designer bags, he'll be utterly disillusioned. Her finger hovers over the price tag of one bag to 55200 yen. Freezes in shock, wondering how a bag that doesn't even seem to hold much could cost that much, and mentally calculates how many days' worth of groceries that represents. Overwhelmed just by the sight of those prices, she collapses onto the floor, gasping, thinking that this plan is far too dangerous for her. Closes her laptop, concluding that she can't waste money on useless purchases like that. She needs to save for future and doesn't want her daughter to ever need student loans. She decides to move on to plan number 3, a last resort that will require all of her resolve. Walks into the living room, puzzled by the eerie silence, while prepares herself for a plan she truly didn't want to use. He calls her name, and suddenly she jumps out from behind the sofa, startling him. Dressed in a magical girl costume, she strikes a pose and shouts, "Love Kaiser Solitaire." Dramatically declares that he has at last witnessed her true form, leaving utterly bewildered. With great enthusiasm, she explains that she's a huge otaku of the anime Love Kaiser and that she watches every episode at least 3 times. As she goes on excitedly about the series, a button from her costume pops open and, flustered, covers his face, thinking that the size definitely doesn't fit. She then confesses that when she adopted, she wanted to have something in common to talk about with her. Reveals that she started watching the anime liked and ended up getting even more addicted to it than her own daughter. She recalls a scene from the anime, repeating one of the characters' lines. Marvels at how surprisingly deep the show's themes are, and at the sheer amount of official merchandise available. A montage follows, showing how 10 years ago she and Little would watch the show together with excitement, while now the teenage girl has long lost interest. Still dressed in her costume, proudly declares that she's obsessed even at her age and asks if that doesn't make him laugh, but stays silent. Instead of answering, he points to the safety pin on her outfit, correctly identifying the costume as Love Kaiser Solitaire. Surprised, asks how he knows, and he explains that even after 10 years, the character is still incredibly popular. He continues, mentioning that she still gets new merchandise released and even had a cameo in last year's summer movie. Excitedly agrees, recalling how shocked she was when she saw the character appear in the film. The two exchange a cheerful high five, and adds that the original voice actress even reprised her role, which makes beam with joy. Then she asks how he knows so much about it, and he admits shyly that he also watches Love Kaiser every week. With a gentle smile, admits that, to be honest, he already knew San loved Love Kaiser. Shocked, she asks how, and he explains that once complained about her mother secretly buying merchandise and doing cosplay. Shrinks in embarrassment, remembering frustrated words about how her mother never gives up on inviting her to anime events. Goes on, saying that he also enjoys anime and movies, and that's why he wanted to watch something she liked. Smiling, he tells her that he's watched everything from the first season and genuinely found it interesting, even though at first he thought it was just a kid's show. Listens, deeply moved, as he admits that before he even realized it, he had become a big fan himself. With a sincere smile, starts discussing the story arcs and deeper themes of the series, showing how he tried to understand the hobby she worked so hard to hide. Realizes, her chest tightening with emotion, that he's not mocking her, he simply wants to share in the things she loves. Then the young man points at her toy weapon, recognizing it as Love Kaiser Solitaire's transformation item. He continues, asking if it wasn't that expensive, limited edition piece from, and confirms proudly, explaining that the quality absolutely matches the price. Finds her mother collapsed over the table, lamenting the complete failure of her plan. In despair, wonders how things ended up like this when is always teasing her about her hobby. The girl says people can have whatever hobbies they want, but asks her mother to please stop inviting her to Love Kaiser events. Blushing, explains that she only invites her because she feels out of place going alone. With a playful smile, suggests that from now on she could just go with instead. Her daughter notes that the plan to make hate her doesn't seem to be going very well. She goes on, grinning, saying that from what she's heard, the two of them are actually getting closer, which sends into a panic. Meanwhile, his own thoughts echo the same. His affection for her has only grown stronger. Regaining her resolve, his mother declares that she still has plenty of other flaws to use, and that she'll chip away at his feelings little by little. With a serious expression, confronts her directly, asking how long she plans to keep running away. Says she doesn't care, but if her mother is going to continue like this, she has her own plans. Remains silent at the bottom of the stairs, visibly worried. On the phone, laughs, calling the story of who the university student truly loves a masterpiece. Smiles gently as his boss comments that his love isn't for the daughter, but for the mother. Her boss praises her, saying it's enviable to have someone thinking about her for 10 years and that it's pure love. Scolds her, explaining that she called for a serious consultation, which surprises San. The woman teases her, asking if she wasn't just bragging and suggests she try going out with the young man. She shouts in a panic that it's not that simple, but her boss calmly replies that if it doesn't work out, they can just break up. Argues that she is focusing too much on the age difference and reminds her that he is a young adult, over 20 years old. Agrees but insists that he is still a young man with a more than 10-year age difference, and that, using common sense, the situation is complicated. Her boss's sudden laughter over the phone completely catches off guard. Questions what she means by common sense, finding it ironic to hear those words coming from her, of all people. She reminds that 10 years ago, without a stable job, savings, or experience, she still followed her feelings and adopted her niece. San asks if, after all that, she still dares to talk about common sense, leaving speechless. With a sigh, her boss observes that over the past 10 years has changed a lot too. She reminds her that 10 years ago she was young and had nothing to lose, but now she does have things she wants to protect. Reflects that she finally understands the people from her past because they too had lives they wanted to protect. She recalls that back then she was young and empty-handed, which allowed her to act freely and follow her heart. Her boss lists everything she's built since then, her relationships with the neighbors and her responsibilities at work. San concludes that the adult she's become, now with so much to lose, uses the words common sense to protect everything she's worked so hard to build. San welcomes her to the terribly boring world of adults. Lies down on the floor, exhausted and overwhelmed, covering her eyes with her hands. Appears in the doorway and says there's nothing to be done about that kind of thing.